Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second episode in the Jurassic Balboa Park series. Today, I'll be speed building a detailed entrance to the marine reptile themed section in my park, and I'll be utilizing the newly added spotlights to create the aquatic and summery theme I'm after. Let's dive right in, pun intended. Okay, so right here I'm doing some path work, using these curved sections to sort of make a little bit of a wavy motif across the path. This is the lagoon section of the park, so why not make it a little bit aquatic? Right here I'm trying to figure out how to meld the darker gray path into the salmon colored Jurassic World path. I did that with a simple triangle. And then over here I'm making little garden sections, just little openings in the path that I can put decorations or rocks inside of later on. I usually don't like having massive sections of just uninterrupted path. And then right here, I'm trying to fiddle with the terrain constraints in order to get the restroom in there, because having a building somewhere along the path helps a lot with that. Even though the topography lines show that it's the same elevation, sometimes that's not exactly the case. So I'm just going in there and flattening it all out. And then right here, I'm using the foliage brushes to put in some trees. I usually like using the foliage brushes as early on as I can because it helps with performance. Right here, I know I'm skipping about a little bit. I'm trying to fit the shark feeder into the lagoon, but because I use the lagoon glitch, it's just making all of that a little tricky. So I'm just putting down the shark feeder, seeing which rocks and plants are in the way of the hitboxing. So I'm just deleting those to fit it in there, because I really wanted to put a mosasaurus in here and have a way for the mosasaurus to jump out of the water. And then I realized right here that the shark is way too close to that rock on the inside edge, so I had to delete that. And then I went in there with the elevation tool, which can lower the rocks on the inside. And then right here, I'm just changing the skin of the mosasaurus to be a little bit more vibrant. And then over here, I'm lining the paths with mosasaurus flags, which, I mean, you may make the argument that I put way too many here, but if you go to a real theme park, they definitely do have those flags lining the paths, like almost every couple feet. And then right here, I'm trying to make a little bit of an off-centered geometric centerpiece for this area. I don't know, it's a little bit different than what I normally do, but I think it came out really nice and I like it. You see, I go in here and put two benches in this kind of right angle L shape, and then filling it in with the potted plants. It's just a nice little spot. I like it. It's nice and cozy. I tried to put the fountain over here, but the terrain constraints just make it sink down into the ground if it's too close to an edge. So instead I went with the Jurassic Park rock. And then over here, I started using rocks because I had the idea, what if I made it look like you were underwater, in a little coral reef? So I put in these massive rocks with the intention of using the spotlights to illuminate them with blue or cyan colors to make it look like it was underwater. And as you can see, it looks really cool. I'm so glad that Frontier added these spotlights into the game, because it's just it's such a logical decision to create just some sort of lighting for objects above ground, because these were initially available in lagoons, which I really appreciate, because this build would not have been possible, or at least wouldn't have looked half as cool without those spotlights. I usually don't like lining the paths with just a bunch of planters, because personally I don't think that looks the most realistic, and also it is just a dog on performance, which I am playing on Xbox Series X, but I still like to keep the game running at a decent frame rate until the end of the park. Right here, you can see I'm starting to put in those lighting effects, and ooh, it's getting really good now. I end up even like lighting the rocks in the background because I think that also creates a really cool effect. I experimented with making those fountains a lighter color, ended up not going with that because it looked weird. And then I'm playing around with putting some larger Mediterranean trees in here because I wanted a bit more of a canopy layer. You know, the palm trees are nice, but they only provide so much coverage. And then over here, I ultimately decided this fountain was a good idea. Just covering up that path because I didn't need it anymore. And then I was like, okay, well, I need some sort of entrance to sort of make this transition between the darker path and the lighter salmon path just a little bit less awkward. So I sort of did this little like palm tree with torch gate thing. I really like it. I think it looks really cool. You can see it a little bit from the front there. And then I use these bamboo canopies, which I use the standalone bamboo stick decoration to kind of make those look a little bit more incorporated in the environment. I usually like doing that just so that it, you know, it makes it look a little bit more intentional. And then I'm just sprinkling in some palm trees. And then over here, I'm just lining it with fence because even if it's not an enclosure, I like using fence to line paths because it just, I don't know, it encloses the area. I don't like just having like an open space or field that guests could potentially run off into. And then right here, I'm trying to replace some of those ginkgo that got removed by the fence. Placing this banner kind of messed with the terrain a little bit, but I just went back in there and smoothed it out. Alright, I'm just gonna leave you guys to enjoy the music in the building for a little bit. Okay, I'm back. Initially, I put this fan palm there. Really didn't like that. Replaced it with something that was a little bit shorter. I usually operate with like tree clumps on like the rule of 3 or 2. Like as long as there's 2 or 3 in a clump, it usually makes the tree look a little bit less awkward. Right here, I'm fitting in a rock, and I try for about 3 minutes to fit this rock in there. So I'm just gonna save you guys the trouble and skip past that. And then here, I'm putting in the path instead because I determined that the rock was impossible to fit in there. And then right here, I'm just putting some chairs down, a John Hammond statue, just making all these little small areas where guests could theoretically sit down and have a little rest. And then here, I'm making a little bit of like a garden. Gardens are really hard to accomplish in this game because of how limited the foliage is, but I tried my best, and in the end, I really like it. It looks pretty intentional, not just like I threw a bunch of random plants around, which partially I did, but nobody needs to know that. I know this was a bit of a departure from the tour-focused videos I usually do, but I really enjoyed building on camera, and I'd love to know if you guys want more videos in this style. Until next time, keep being shenanigan-y people.